Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Woon. I'm one of the co-hosts of the YMyHealth podcast. And today we are joined by Dr. Sarah Diekman, a physician and advocate who has overcome some extraordinary challenges, including POTS. And today we have her on the podcast actually to talk about telemedicine, which I think has been an increasingly popular subject matter, especially post-COVID. But as an expert, both physician and in telemedicine, we thought that Sarah would be a great person to speak with us today about the topic. So Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're so excited. I think just to get us started, can you quickly share a bit about your background? Because you have a unique background, both in both healthcare and law, which I think is interesting and will relate to this topic as we talk a little bit further later today. But just discuss how your background's, related to telemedicine.
Yeah. Well, so for telemedicine specifically, it kind of helps me understand why some of the one of the big downfalls of telemedicine is that even though I can easily reach across state lines with the power of technology and see someone like say in two neighboring states, right? I'm in Maryland and someone I'm licensed in Nevada, but I couldn't see someone in California that's, just across the state line.
Yeah.
That is rooted actually in our Constitution, which you might think it wouldn't go that deep, but it's actually the Constitution is the reason that we have these challenges. We can overcome them, but definitely my law background helps me understand why this seemingly completely unnecessarily cumbersome problem exists.
Yeah. And for people who are maybe listening to the podcast and they're either not familiar with telemedicine or they're aware of it, but maybe they've never used it before, could you just give a quick definition?
Yeah, so telemedicine is the practice of medicine, basically in the setting that we're in right now, where I can see you, I can talk to you. I think there are some, there might be some phone types of telemedicine that I think was more relevant before the internet and, smartphones are what they are now. I think phone visits are pretty rare nowadays. So essentially, it's everything that I can see and communicate by what we're doing right now.
Yeah, just in this digital world we live in, I guess, more modern version of healthcare.
Yes.
Um, and you spoke a little bit about, or you touched on it just briefly, about some of the challenges. Um, do you want to get into a little bit more about challenges that physicians specifically face when implementing telemedicine into their practices?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is understanding like when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate. I think that so it's been on the news lately. I think Amazon is facing their first large lawsuit for a telemedicine visit that really is from what it appears on the surface. I have no personal experience, but like what the reporting looks like was the essence of that. The the problem there was that it was inappropriate for telemedicine at all. So in medicine, we divide up things into what's called chief complaints, which basically means like, why are you seeing a doctor? My toe hurts. I have a cough. In medicine, we always get these one-liners like, why did the person show up today? And some chief complaints automatically inappropriate for telemedicine visits. Do not collect go, do not press the button. Chest pain, never appropriate for a telemedicine visit. No gray lines there, no blurred lines there, never okay. Um for other so it really gets murky as far as some chief complaints, like what it's okay, not okay. Sometimes you have to dig in a little bit, and then a patient you realize they have a red flag symptom, and you just have no choice but to recommend they go to the emergency room. And yeah.
And I think, we're going to see probably pros and cons, but how does telemedicine improve or maybe hinder, in some cases, the doctor-patient relationship?
Right. So I have heard a lot about people feeling like then you have to be in that room with somebody. A lot about that kind of brings like an intrinsic connectedness. I'm not sure how patients actually feel about that. I think that might be something we've projected onto patients and not necessarily. I think patients care a lot more about whether or not you're listening to them and actually deeply considering the symptoms they have. Um, I think a lot of my patients identify as with me, like feel close to me compared to a lot of people they're in the same room with during a lot of physical exams. So I don't think it's intrinsic that
Mhm.
because you are not in the same room that you don't have that same level of connectedness. Now the benefit is that you can bring it'll so in the modern age, physicians have become very specialized, and which can be a beautiful thing. It can also be a bad thing, but this is also why we have some practitioners who are not so specialized, right? But like me, I basically treat like two or three diagnoses and some of their sister diagnoses, but almost all my patients have like the diagnosis is almost always already made when I see them, but I can just read every article and spend all my time trying to become really good at treating this one thing. And because of telemedicine, I can reach people in far geographic areas because not everybody has, even though probably 1% of the population, 1 to 2% of the population, which is a lot and it is underdiagnosed, have dysautonomia, POTS, long COVID, which is what I treat. They're still, they're not going to be all right here in my hometown where I live. Even the state of Maryland, where I treat most of my patients, are in all the far reaches of Maryland, which is not a big state, but it allows me to have that deep focus onto this one thing and reach patients um, without a geographic barrier.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit at the start about, some of the laws around this, and um, there is a location aspect. So I know you're talking about you can practice digitally or online in a few different states, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can practice online in every state, correct?
Right. So, um, the let's go to the origins here. Okay. So where this all comes from, the state lines and the practice of medicine. Each state owns its practice of medicine like completely. And that comes from the Constitution, actually. So that's the 10th and 11th Amendment, which essentially uh, spell out that health and safety belong to the states. And there's been many constitutional challenges since this inception of this country about like what is health and safety, but I don't think there's been very many when it comes to like medical licensing. Although there's some interesting things when it comes to like the NFL, where their physicians now there is some federal law where they get to move around, which is interesting because really seems to me that probably each state would have to sign on to that, but maybe they were able to get that. I'm not sure. But because it's a constitutional issue, really means that even like the United States Congress um, would not be able to pass a law to override that, right? Because the Constitution is supreme. Um, so how, and same thing goes for like nursing, but where some of this different healthcare professions like nursing have done a better job of creating licensing that is universal across states. Take our driver's license, right? Because that actually is health and safety. The drive, like any state, if they wanted to, could pass a law and not recognize the driver's license of another state. Theoretically, there is a constitutional right to travel, so like maybe you could fight it on that ground, but mostly these states are playing nicely with each other by accepting the driver's license, right? Like you can drive anywhere in this country with your driver's license because the other states have accepted and passed like reciprocal laws. So medicine has not faced any pressure up until this point to have some of this reciprocity across state lines. Nursing, we've had travel nursing for a long time. So I think it has behooved states to pass either easier licensing or universal licensing. We have something like this happening for medical licenses, but it's not in all the states. So it's the interstate medical licensing compact. And one at a time, these states, what they have to do is adopt legislation at the state level saying that basically you can get a license through that compact system. They all still want to get paid. So you still have to pay each state's licensing fees, but it's really burdensome to get a medical license. You have to like, I mean, I'm not kidding when I say I've had to send in SAT scores and like the level of transcripts sometimes that they can ask for. You're like, they don't even print them. I'm too old and I'm not even that old. So some of the states can really, it can be tremendously burdensome to try to get a license. So having kind of this central licensing compact, they're saying, give us our money, but all the credentials that were kind of good enough, we have this centralized credentialing thing and we trust it. So we'll give you a license. But I think that's only like 25 or something states have that right now for medicine.
Got it. And, I think there's a few different reasons people might be unsure about telemedicine. One of them is, patient data, privacy and security on these platforms. Can you speak a little bit to how you address those concerns maybe with your own patients?
Yeah. I mean, as far as actually, so first, I'm not, even though I guess I have like a kind of tech business. I'm not a very tech person. So the EMRs, which is electronic medical records, a lot of times they're the ones who are actually giving you the platform to see the patients, like so mine is actually a HIPAA encrypted Zoom. So it looks just like a regular Zoom, but a lot of times my patients who already have Zoom have to like reload the app or do an update or something because I guess that's what happens because it's like a HIPAA encrypted one. But I mean, I'm really relying on these tech companies. So I hope they know what they're doing. I mean, that's the idea is it's HIPAA encrypted, just like the medical records. But
Sure.
I'm punching above my weight class to say that I really understand all the security level of implications. I'm relying on their experts.
I think that's fair though. I don't necessarily think that patients expect their physicians to be tech experts, but I think that the piece that you've touched on is the due diligence of finding a platform that's HIPAA
Yes.
compliant. So
Yes.
I think that's probably what, you know, if I'm a patient and I'm coming to somebody, maybe what to look for when you're going
True.
to be working with them remotely.
Yeah, it should either be through the electronic medical record platform itself, which is like where mine is generate. So it's a Zoom link, but the Zoom link, like the first part of it is the electronic medical records platform, which they saw because as part of their booking process, there's so many names for these different EMRs, but you should have seen it when you're scheduling your appointment. So that part of it should look familiar. And then it should be running through that one. Or sometimes you purchase them a la carte. So I have worked in places where like the EMR is one thing, and then the messaging for whatever business reason they purchased a separate, but that itself, like you should be able to look up that platform easily. And that should also be like HIPAA compliant, encrypted, that.
Perfect. And besides maybe, privacy and security, are there any other kind of ethical considerations that physicians should be taking into account when they're going to provide care remotely?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is you have to be ready to tell somebody something they don't want to hear, which is sometimes like they need to go to the emergency room. Like I have definitely told more than one patient who did not want to hear it, um, that I just couldn't, and different physicians have different thresholds of like chance. Um, I tend to be on the more cautious side of things. And, if there is anything that I cannot either examine, and you really can examine a lot with telemedicine. I can't, push on someone's stomach and see if it's tender. I can't listen to their heart. More importantly, I can't put an EKG on them. I would be useless with interpreting some of these tests. I mean, not like totally useless, but I would never, if I was worried about my patient's heart, I would not be the last one to look at that EKG. Let me tell you what, like like only a cardiologist would make me sleep well at night. So, I think really understanding the limitations and not letting our, I guess you'd say, confirmation bias, not just seeing what you want to see, or if you find an inconvenient symptom, not just ignoring it because it's an inconvenience to the patient. And really, yeah, it's safety first. And our ERs are so busy right now. I mean, the wait times are awful. Like I understand that people don't want to go, but I you've got to just explain to someone why you are worried, what you are worried about, and err on the side of caution. I think that is the duty, but also to say that it doesn't hurt. Or like, because sometimes I think we all have a hero complex who go into medicine. Like we want to be all the things, and sometimes we cannot, and you just have to say, I can't, I cannot, like, do 100% of what needs to be done on this platform. And even when that's not what people want to hear.
Yeah. I know that there are some physicians who have started incorporating things like wearable devices
Mm.
into their telemedicine practice. So, there are those instances where obviously you're not there in person. Like you said, you can't, touch a patient, or maybe it's even the patient can't show you something because it's an internal, symptom or thing that they're experiencing. And these wearable devices sometimes can, bridge that gap. Have you incorporated any of these into the virtual care that you provide? And if so, what's your experience?
So I don't have any kind of I don't know if you call them real time. Like my patients will send me stuff after it happened.
Yeah.
Um a lot of cardiologists, a lot of my patients have cardiologists and they may have like implantable like Holter monitors. And those cardiologists, I think, are reviewing that like every 24 hours or at some set period of time. Um, you do have to be really careful because any data you get, you are responsible for. So you owe it to your patients that if they're going to give you some data, because they're going to naturally be relying on you, that you are able to look at that and interpret that in a reasonable and safe amount of time. So, there's there's nothing at this point that would be clinically useful to my patient population, as far as kind of, well, I don't know if you call it real time or maybe semi real time, like on a rolling basis, right? Like maybe something comes in every 24 hours or something like that. I'm not set up for that, although I think cardiology is like a good model of how that's happening. But I do look at like iWatch readings over time, continuous glucose monitors. So those are probably the big ones. And then journals, which is like the old the old tech. But in a way, it's kind of the original wearable is symptom journals. And cuz I look for patterns a lot with my patients, is we're looking for patterns as far as like what are symptom triggers and maybe what would be therapeutic um targets for them, and then also measuring improvements. So that I think that's where wearables have a big role in our future, is one, helping people understand if they're doing better or worse, because like in the chronically ill population, which I treat. I myself have a chronic illness. When you're really sick all the time, you try to get if you feel good for one day, it's really easy to overdo it, to try and get the most out of that good day that you have. And so sometimes it can be hard to measure if improvement is happening. And then it can also be hard to detect if you're overdoing it. If I had like one wish for my patients other than to just cure their illnesses, it would be like a wearable that could help them detect when they're overdoing it, because that's actually one of the big problems we have with POTS. So I think there's a lot of future. I think we're really at the just dipping our toe in the pool right now.
It's funny that you brought up the journals and kind of the old school tech, so to speak. I think it perfectly sort of segues into what my next question is, which is, uh, it, to some extent, you know, there's a lot of benefits around telemedicine, but it would be, I think, wrong to ignore the fact that, there is an accessibility piece here too. And so, in what ways does telemedicine maybe help underserved communities or rural
Mm.
communities, but also potentially serve as a barrier to others who are looking to access services?
Yeah. So, certainly it can allow specialists, but the type of specialists who are not doing procedures, right? Like, it doesn't help anybody who does procedures. It can help evaluate. Okay. So, like, you can see a surgeon and they could maybe look at your x-rays or imaging and stuff, and you can have a consult with them, and it can help you decide if you want to drive 4 hours to see them. That might be helpful. Okay. But for the most part, you can't do, although I think they have done some stuff with some of these robotics across the world. But for the most part, you've got to be in the same room with the person who's doing surgery on you. So any of those kind of procedural things, it doesn't help. Um, but as far as experts who are making the bulk of diagnosis, a lot of times diagnosis, right? So when diagnosis is the problem, that's a lot of times where it can really, really bridge the gap, because imaging can travel, labs can travel, symptoms can travel. A few physical exam findings can't travel, but like even during COVID, one of the uh during like lockdowns and stuff, some of the really severe but chronic cardiac patients who needed to see their doctors, like there are elements now. We have electronic stethoscopes, and you don't even need the earpiece. It's just the head. Like, they were sending them to patients so they can literally position the stethoscope on themselves and send the data there. So I mean, there's really amazing ways to get physical exam findings over technology. So, diagnosis is probably the biggest way that it spans the gap. Um, but I guess if people don't have access to Wi-Fi, there are places, there are financial barriers to Wi-Fi. There are technology like not even satellite, I think, gets to everywhere. And then I suppose if our infrastructure starts to lean on the assumption that everyone has access to Wi-Fi, then it may take away resources from some of the federally qualified health centers, which are like those remote health centers that reach out into rural areas. So you could have a resource diversion issue. I don't know how much that is actually a problem, though, because I think for the most part, it's telemedicine coming into you can get real specialized care into those federally qualified health centers. So I think for the most part, it's been an access expander. I have not heard a lot about it not. It's most the biggest thing I well, so I'm a geriatric millennial, if you will. And back in my day, when I was in med school, was like the real beginning of the real internet, right? Like, we had, AOL when I was a teenager, but it's not the same kind of internet that we have now. So my med school education, first part of it was still paper charts. So right through the beginning of the mandates for electronic medical records. I mean, in the early days of telemedicine, it was just looked at like, oh my gosh. I mean, this is just neglect on a computer, right? Like, could you be more neglectful? And this was coming from even like the psychiatrist, who I'm like, we don't even touch our patients most of the time. I mean, so why why is this? I think the natural fear of the unknown. I think a lot of the fear starts with the healthcare, like the call is coming from inside the house. The physicians themselves very scared of telemedicine. I think, we're afraid of making a mistake. We're afraid of missing something. But part of it is that patients do consent to the limitations of telemedicine and comes to things like psychiatry, like how many limitations, the limitation is pretty small.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a lot of people, COVID probably was maybe the first time they've ever interacted with a physician in this way.
Oh, yeah.
Um, can you tell me a little bit about how you saw the pandemic really shape the use and the perception of telemedicine?
Yeah, probably the perception, which then led to the use because I mean, there was just so much hesitancy and fear. I think the fear of the unknown, the fear of the new. Um, we are always terrified of being negligent in medicine. Everything we do is to not make a mistake, to not fall below that standard of care. And that really was just, pushing right off the diving board into the water. Um, and uh yeah, I don't know where we would be on our progress with telemedicine now. Um, n- there's not even words to describe how much that accelerated it and increased the confidence. The technology was ready. So that's the thing is we probably were ready 5 years ago. Probably 2015 was really ready for where we are now with telemedicine, but there was just way too much fear. And then something else came along. We had something bigger to be afraid of. And so that fear was dwarfed. And here we are now.
Yeah, totally. Uh, what are some of the misconceptions that people have had or maybe still have about telemedicine that you think are important to clear up?
Yes. So, yeah, and I think it's different different from the patient side and like the physician side. So, from the physician side, I think it's almost just like a little I think maybe there's the fear of the unknown of like what what am I going to do if um but I don't think they even asked that question. It's an unasked question and just like an unnamed fear of uh, th- what do you do if there's an exam finding or something you need someone to touch the patient and you can't do it. Well, have a plan for that. So I think it's the not asking the question that creates the fear. Um And, I kind of have a standard operating procedure, like, know for every single one of my patients, like, I want them to see a cardiologist. There's stuff that I need from cardiology. The thing is that would be no different if I saw them in person. So it's just kind of important for me to inventory, like, what am I really worried about? Would I even be able to answer that question if I was in the room with somebody? Or am I just kind of automatically assuming I can't do my job because we've been so trained to do the heart and lung exam and then like push on the stomach. But honestly, we find these like the cardiologists are really good at detecting murmurs and stuff like that. But I mean, oh my gosh, you need an echo anyways. And if someone has symptoms, I'm going to send them for an echo. So the physical exam is important, but a lot of the time we're using other tools anyways. And something like 70 to 80% of diagnosis is made from history alone. There is nothing in the whole world that is more important than taking a detailed history from your patients. And that's what I'm able to do by having less overhead for my clinic. I'm able to offer longer exams, um, longer visits, because that is where so much of the diagnosis is. And then from the patient side, oh, they're hoping to avoid the ER. And sometimes we can't. Like I said about not not always being able to tell people what they want to hear. And I mean, it's not because I don't understand. It really is like the breaking bad news. Um, you can't always avoid the ER and the wait times. It used to be that like primary care doctors could see people the same day. I mean, can you even imagine such a
Yeah.
time? The only people who are so if you want a doctor like that, direct patient primary care where you're like cash pay, they are often able to see their patients the same day. So that's, I think, an important message. I'm a big supporter of direct patient primary care. I've chosen it for my own care in the past and will in the future. Um, but yeah, there was a time when pretty much everybody could go see their primary care doctor the same day for certain things like you could go see them, but now it's either urgent care or the ER. Typically, if I'm sending someone somewhere, it's probably going to be the ER because, like, um, occasionally I might send someone to urgent care. I think they can handle it, but unfortunately, if there's something I'm worried about, it probably needs to go to the ER. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know patients, they want us to not have to ever say that, and I want to never have to say that, but I have a duty always do what's best and for their health and safety, and not necessarily the other burdens of our overrun system.
Totally. So, for a patient who's maybe trying telemedicine for the first time, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, probably the same advice I give my patients in general. Okay, so the hardest thing is when people are really I do deal with a lot of my patients have complex medical problems. So like if you patients usually know if their doctor is really in it with them. Like they're right. I learned that in medical school a long time ago. Like the patients knew when the attendings didn't believe them. And the attendings would, like, tell them, like, "Oh, yeah, I believe you," and then they didn't. They didn't. So, like, patients usually know, and having a if you can find at least that one doctor who's kinda there with you, but, they may not actually have an expertise in what's wrong, and you may need to go to someone else, and I have to send my patients to a lot of specialists who I a lot of times know they're not going to necessarily like there's a lot of bias against my patient population. So, um we think through our goals, like what do we actually need from this doctor? Like what are our actual goals for this visit and distill it down to like 2 or 3 questions. Like the more that you can distill something down and then you always want to know what's the next step. Like what am I going to go home and do after this and what should I be looking for a positive or negative response to treatment? Like what should I be looking for? Those are probably universal goals for like just any visits. Telemedicine or not.
And why does telemedicine, why is it so well suited for providing healthcare, especially to millennials or, people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s?
I think well for one the geographic, right? So it is so easy to tell people like, "Oh, go see your doctor." And um but I mean, where are these supportive employers who let you take half a day off to go see your doctor and or to yeah, I mean, it's like half a day, and then it's catastrophic if you go see them and the clinic is behind the wait, which, I get behind in telemedicine too. Sometimes patients take longer than anticipated, but usually people are more able to quickly reschedule. Like, if they had some work stuff, they can then be available as long as I can give them an update, like we're running 20 minutes behind. They can work for that 20 minutes and then they get that time back. Plus, they don't have to travel. So it really, I mean, usually going to a doctor's appointment, unless you are so lucky that they just live right outside your door, just like walking distance to you and they're running on time. This is like a half a day thing. And our employers are not supportive of that kind of human need. Like most employers, and I mean, what if you need to see a doctor a couple of times a month? They, I mean, employees that they will not tolerate that. So it's such an accessibility thing. Plus, a lot of like my patients, a lot of them get very sick from riding in cars, from changing environments, triggers their illnesses. So a lot of times, telemedicine is a way for them to see a doctor and not get sick from the visit itself.
Yeah, I think, you know, uh, we talked a lot about different benefits of telemedicine, and I think uh, it's interesting to see how far it's come. And it was interesting for me to hear you say, like, we were probably ready for this, 5 years even before the pandemic came along. Um, I guess, do you foresee telemedicine becoming the norm, you know, provided for certain types of care, or do you think it will stay maybe more of a supplementary tool?
I do think for some things it will become the norm. I do think that there's going to be some bad things that happen first. Um, it seems like the well, so there's a lot of money going into telemedicine platforms, right? And so some of that financial push into telemedicine platforms, we've seen it with some companies already having some catastrophic outcomes. And medicine is not perfect. It's like we literally deal with life and death, and the expectation is pretty much a zero miss rate. I mean, this is what we want and, pretty close to expect is near perfection with modern medicine, which, um, coming up against the forces of nature, like nature is in charge. Like we are trying to stave off the forces of nature. It is a huge task. Um, so yeah, some of these platforms, I suppose maybe it's the nature of it, the less risk averse people are not the ones diving into the newest thing. And so and also like financing, right? Like who's financing these things. So there's so much upside with telemedicine. And just across the board right now, there's a problem with healthcare workers are not listened to and are not in charge of medicine. Money is in charge of medicine. And I think those forces can be a little bit stronger on some of these well, maybe it's not stronger, but the downside can be huge on some of these telemedicine platforms because guess what? what have I been saying this whole time, right? Like telling people what they don't want to hear, that they have to go to the ER and I can't, it's not safe to avoid that. Like, that's not going to get a 5-star review from a lot of people. Like, depends on how deep they dig. You know, if they go to the ER and they realize I saved their life, I might get a 5-star. Although there's this joke that went around from one of these physicians. He's an oncologist, and he posted one of his reviews that said, like, I think it was Dr. Lewis saved my life, and he only got 4 out of 5 stars, which tells you a lot about like what it is to practice medicine, right? Like saving people's life is not enough. Um, and I'm laughing about it because I own my own practice. So my reviews are my problem. But when you really have someone who's your boss and they really want you to get 5 stars at all costs, the cost can be taking a chance with people's lives in a real serious way, because sometimes the safe thing is a very inconvenient thing for patients. Like, it can be safety checks on suicidal patients who don't want safety checks. Like they're expressing something really dangerous where normally if they were in the same room with you, uh they would, like, so it's like an emergency hold kind of thing. And then again, like the going to the ER. So this is some of the challenge of medicine is not the same as manufacturing. Like, there are inconvenient things that happen in medicine. We discover things that we don't want to discover all the time. Sometimes the answer, or sometimes the test that needs to be run is not what we were hoping for. It's not a 5-star experience. And a lot of those are like more systematic issues, but it can come down to like that one, all that falls onto the one person. All of these pressures, and a lot of times in a really short visit, because they're not allowed to have a long visit, they have to weigh all of those things all at once. And yeah, so those these are this is some of the real potential downsides of telemedicine, like also the support. Because here's the thing too, this is important, because if there's a malpractice, like, plaintiffs have an option to sue like 2 ways. There may be more, but you can sue like the person who provided you the care, or you can sue their boss. And what the boss is hoping for is that you're going to sue the person who provided the care, and they can just make max profits off that person by pressuring them to take chances with patients' health, by pressuring them to maximize profits, by only allowing them short visits, by like putting all these metrics on that drive profits and not patient safety, because they're hoping that they don't get sued if something goes wrong, and that it just falls on that one person. They could be like, they made the bad medical decision, not us. Yeah, there's a lot of that. And not just in telemedicine, mind you.
Yeah, definitely. And it's unfortunate. I mean, I think
Yeah.
to your point, we see that more and more often. And so, uh, I'm curious, let's say 5 years down the road, where do you see telemedicine, um, kind of in the future?
I do see, well, okay. Or would I like to see it? Let's do that one instead.
Go for it.
um, because I do feel like our American healthcare system, it's almost like it has to run to the ground before it's going to get rebuilt. I don't know how low we're going to go. And so I don't know if that's 5 years or 1 year. I don't know when we hit rock bottom. But I think an ideal, like what comes after rock bottom, maybe that's 5 years from now, is a really supportive model of integrating telemedicine with in-person visits. And the even having like little remote stations that are maybe in kind of how see drugstores or grocery stores have like the blood pressure cuffs. Those are not often like accurately calibrated. Um, but if we have like medical assistants or nurses who can take vital signs from people very close to where they are. So maybe they only have like a 10-minute drive to get their vital signs, maybe some blood drawn, which is still, I mean, you can go to a Quest or whatever now, but still maybe like a one-stop shop with, because the vital signs are vital. So having better vital signs would be great for telemedicine, and having that be an accepted standard and being able to incorporate those into visits. And then, I mean, it would be wonderful if I could send someone to the ER uh, with like really like but I don't know if this will ever happen because everybody wants to fast track their patients into the ER. Like what? Like basically our ER just needs more staff. Like can we please just stop understaffing the ERs? Um, s- yeah.
If
So I guess that's what it like just kind of an integration between that hands-on stuff and the telemedicine stuff.
Yeah,
And maybe even more telemedicine coming into the ER too. That's one that doesn't happen very often. Um, but that can be really helpful too.
absolutely. And if someone is considering telemedicine as a career focus, what skills or training would you recommend?
Um, so the training. So I think well first thing you really have to really be ready for is I think what I've mentioned a lot is finding what you don't want to find. So I think that's like the first thing is think about all the things that can go wrong and have a plan for that. People expect that of physicians. They expect us to be the ones that carry those burdens and have a plan for that. So you need to have a plan for that because there the it, the the longer you practice, eventually patient's going to tell you something you don't want to hear. And you need to have a plan for that. They're going to tell you, so don't wait until it happens. Think of like the worst things they could tell you and make a plan for that. Um, that's we're pretty much already trained for that in hospital medicine. It's more of like a system problem. So when it comes to telemedicine, what I mean is the things they tell you, it's because like we know what we would do if we were in a hospital. So what are you going to do now that it's on telemedicine? Um, and good old fashioned history taking, which is the backbone of all medicine is taking a good history.
Perfect. Well, I know we have covered a lot today. Um, Pretty much run the gamut, I think, of telemedicine and also just a little bit about, honestly, healthcare systems too, and how they progressed right now digitally. Is there anything else that, I haven't touched on or haven't asked that you think is important to talk about when we're discussing telemedicine?
Hmm. Um, just in general, I don't, but I think I already talked about this, but just for patients to trust themselves. I know it's really difficult to navigate our system, and our system is at a really low point right now. Is there are a lot of um physicians who are not given the amount of time they want to spend with their patients. There are a lot of nurses that have ratios that are too high. They're thinking about, like, do I walk off the shift right now because this is unsafe? Or do I just do my best with the ones I have? So it's a really difficult place we're in right now. So on the one hand, I want to tell patients to advocate for themselves, but, and they should. But on the other hand, the setting that they might be advocating in, the person that is in the room with them may have like no control over that. So sometimes you just have to try again with another system or another doctor, because so much of what someone is able to give you right now is dictated by like the system that they're working in, and it's not their choice. So sometimes like advocating, so it is just kind of a balance, advocating, then also moving on and seeing if you can find a better match somewhere else too, because I know a lot of physicians who are really struggling. I mean, they are so overworked, really, just the the resources they are given, the amount of time they are given, is it's impossible to actually do the job right. So, yeah, that's not so much a specific telemedicine thing, but sometimes the telemedicine can help give you options that are outside of your local area. So if you've kind of hit the wall with everything around you, then that can like broaden the options.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for coming on the podcast and for speaking to us about this. Um, In case our listeners aren't aware, Sarah and Diekman Dysautonomia are sponsors of the podcast, which is very exciting for us. So I did also want to just take a minute to let the people know where they can find you. So dysautonomiaexpert.com, I believe, is the website. But Sarah, are there any other socials or any other places that if people want to learn more or get to know you more, that they can find you?
Yeah. So I'm at Diekman Dysautonomia on a couple of platforms, like Blue Sky and Instagram. You mostly just see pictures of my dogs and plants on Instagram, um, but I think part of that is also about living your life with chronic illness. It like doesn't have to just be chronic illness all the time. So some of my platforms are more like fun stuff, and then some of them are my medical rantings. So
Perfect.
yeah.
Perfect mix. Well, thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it. And uh, for everyone listening, thank you. And we'll speak to you all very soon.
Thank you.